Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome.
What up, y'all? This is Antonio Moore. We here for the new year, 2018. We're gonna have a fire show today. You know, everybody's been waiting for me to have this discussion. Yvette Carnell, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, all right. So I brought a guest, Yvette Carnell, here. You know, I've been following her show. I support her show. I even help her with the show. We try to make it fire. And you know, she's over at Breaking Brown. And what I wanted to do is I've been watching her last 3 shows for the top of the year. And she's been dealing with this issue of African Americans and Africans in our community. I want to have a productive discussion. But what I want to talk about more succinctly is a very nuanced part of this. You know, I watched her show called, Justice Police. You know, basically asking the question, should African Americans be the justice police of America? You know, everyone uses our civil rights to make their own struggles make sense. And should we jump on board in the middle of an era where we have hookworms and the UN is saying that we're living in the third world in the first world? You know what I'm saying, Yvette?
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying.
So setting this up, the key element of what I wanted to talk about today was Halfrikan. This concept that I keep hearing where it's like you're half African, meaning you have one family, one parent that came from an African country, any of them of the 52. And then you're also African American, and you've created this new category called Halfrikan, where you're not really African American. And the question I ask is, Halfrikan, are you more Black American despite having one parent that is a recent immigrant and one that is a descendant of American slavery if you've never been to Africa? So I brought Yvette Carnell on the line. You're going to be able to call in at 323-879-4445 and be part of this discussion. You can go to the Dash Radio app, press Dash Talk. You can also catch me streaming on YouTube at Tone Talks to see actually inside the Dash Radio studio. You know, we're going to get this going, but before I go to the questions, because y'all know I do the questions, I'm going to let Yvette chime in and just give me a bit of her opinion on this whole Halfrikan thing, because she's a bit of an expert on this thing now.
Well, you know what that I have to talk about right now that I hadn't even really planned on bringing it up, and I may be interrupting you right now to go straight to it, but I wrote about this when it happened, and you told me, you were like, coming on the show, reread this Issa Rae piece in the Cosmopolitan where she talks about her blackness.
We gonna get to that, Yvette.
We gotta get to that.
Yeah.
No, that was if you watching that live right now, please go Issa Rae Cosmopolitan Blackness, whatever, and find it while we're talking about it.
Yvette is trying to jump in the beginning of my show to the middle. We're going to be talking about Issa Rae today.
It's so horrible.
Now, I want everybody to kind of understand that this isn't an attack on African people or Africans. I think that we have a community here, and there needs to be some unity, but there needs to be an awareness and an understanding that our family's bones built this place, that our family's civil rights struggle built this place. And in many ways, what's happening is that African Americans are being shut out of professions no different than we saw during civil rights, during redlining, during Jim Crow. You know, I'm going to start framing these questions, and I'm going to ask the first one and go straight to Yvette. If your entire life has been in America, in largely Black American cities, Detroit, Los Angeles, New York, and you're half descended from the bones of American slaves, are you running from the reality that you're just Black American by calling yourself Halfrikan? Look closely. You also bear the cost of being culturally lost as well. One that is not cleared by immersing yourself into an African culture. You know, I've seen some of the people go as far as to say they're just Nigerian or they're just Eritrean, when in actuality they've never even seen the place. They've seen it in books and videos, but they've never been there. So they live here, half from here. All of their resources for their life, schooling, infrastructure, all employment is all coming from the reality of the African American struggle. But in a way, they want to distance themselves from that. What do you think, Yvette?
Well, here's one of the problems with that, and you kind of touched on it, but let's talk about it. One of the problems with that, everybody will say to me, like, if I bring up Issa Rae or I bring up somebody who has one African parent, and they'll say, well, Yvette, they're 50-50. So you can't necessarily say that. You can't necessarily say that, okay, you can't let them say, I'm not going to be half Nigerian, Eritrean, or whatever I'm going to be. What I'm telling you, though, is that we're not looking close enough. And the problem is that a lot of these people are anchored in that African side and actively distance themselves from the African American side. And you see that we're not talking about that today, but you see that with mixed race people too sometimes. Like you'll say, well, I'm mixed. So you be mixed when you need to be mixed, and mark African American when you need to be African American. But you're really anchored in this white parent or this white parent's wealth. And I see the same thing with Africans, because a lot of them, not all, we're not talking about all. I want everybody to say, well, this event. No, we're not talking about all. We know that. But you'll be anchored in this like Nigerian culture or something, or wherever you're from, Ethiopian or whatever, and you've never been there. And you're living in this country that was built by slaves. And so what I say is the same thing I say a lot. It's just disrespectful.
And so, I mean, you have so many stars now, either being fully like Nigerian or one of the sorts. You know, David, I believe is Walu. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Then you have these Halfricans or half Africans. Some of them might not even use that term. You know, like Tiffany Haddish, who's half Eritrean. You might not know that. You know, half Eritrean. You have Issa Rae, who is half Senegalese. And in and of itself, I don't think that that's an issue. I just wonder at times, what is up with this whole idea of the recreation of the narrative of the black struggle in a way that loses the lostness of coming from such, you know, descending from slavery. And I think for me, one of the things that I looked at, I saw an article. You can go to okafrica.com. It's called I Am Halfrikan. And in the article, this young woman talks about being Halfrikan, and she says, I just want to share it with you. Again, you can go to okafrica.com and actually see this thing. It's called I Am Halfrikan, Embracing the Two Cultures. She says, I am that chick who knows how to make fried chicken, cornbread, and homemade macaroni and cheese, but without question can still eat the Zimbabwean traditional meal. See, the problem is we start defining African American life through these pop culture kind of like topical ideas of what blackness is, Beyonce and Motown and macaroni and cheese. And I think that it becomes hard for us to see that is a problem. What do you think, Yvette?
Yeah, because I mean, who can't eat macaroni and cheese? Like I don't even see like, and that's the thing. Like we get mixed up in terms of what is culture. And the thing is, black people, and this is something that we have to own as African Americans, because we don't have enough power and agency. Instead of going to do that, we will fixate on culture. Well, we cook a lot better than white people. Don't nobody care. Like I don't. So the thing is, like, well, I can eat macaroni and I can eat this, so I'm this. It doesn't. You don't understand. And so what happens is that people see that as being African American. So African American is collard greens. African American is knowing how to throw down. African American is macaroni and cheese. And so nobody really understands in terms of what we're talking about, systemic marginalization,
Yes.
oppression from slavery, redlining, Reconstruction. You don't see it as that. We have like pigeonhole African American in terms of collard greens and peach cobbler. And that's just minimize everything that we are.
And it's a trip because the article continues on in terms of framing her through, this is the way she describes it. This is the article, I Am Halfrikan. I have also been blessed with a strong Zimbabwean mother who has taught me about struggle and truly starting from nothing. She has sculpted the African woman I am. My father was born and raised in Brooklyn. He takes great pride in exposing his lessons, way of living, and understanding of life onto me and my sibling. He teaches me strength in knowing who I am as a Black American, the importance of being book smart and street smart. He has sculpted the Black American woman I am. So fundamentally, what she's acknowledging is that there's a distinctive difference. But when it comes to that affirmative action application, we want to all say it's the same again. So you live a life that's fractured until it's time to actually disseminate benefit. And the fundamental problem is that these benefits were built not based on color. They weren't just given to people because they're brown. They were distinctively to deal with a redress for a destruction of a people, a destruction of a culture. And I think by letting people play the fence, we end up with nobody on our side. I believe that part of what I see inside of this article and inside of this terminology and inside of so many, and I'm not saying everyone is the same, don't get me wrong, But generally, what I see is the veneer of American blackness, cornbread and Beyonce songs, becomes everything for people instead of the guts, which is the legacy of being locked out and used. You know what I'm saying, Yvette? And Yvette, we have a caller. I'm going to take this caller. Caller, what is your name? Where are you calling from? I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I saw your post about the black nurses being replaced. I can totally attest to that.
Oh
so
yeah,
I work
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
California.
I haven't framed that yet, so it's gonna let me frame that for everybody. So essentially,
Okay.
so many of whether it be Caribbeans or Africans, they came here as a result of particularly a shortage of nurses. There was a shortage of nurses. I was gonna get to that, and I'm still gonna cover that a little later. And it happened through the late '70s, throughout the '80s, and into the early '90s. And because we have a form of like chain immigration here, they could bring a whole family with them. And
Mhm.
what's weird about it all is we had enough black women here to do that job. They just the country had locked them out of opportunity. The country had locked them
Mhm.
out of opportunity. So like meaning, I'm gonna read a little section to give you guys context. But like, there's one section, one story where the first black lady to become a nurse, she had to do 20 years, I think, of internship at a hospital that only let one black person actually take that internship. So you
Mhm.
fundamentally had created a shortage of black nurses by not letting black descendant of slave women become nurses. And to address it, you imported nurses. You didn't address the damage that you did to a community. I mean, you want to give your
Mhm.
opinion on it? Because now I framed it for you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm looking at all like the Filipino nurses. I mean, they outnumber us 10 to, I mean, like 9 to 1. Like there's like 9 Filipino nurses to 1 nurse. And if there's a black nurse, they are African.
Mm,
And it's just crazy. I mean, they're not letting us into nursing schools, especially in California.
mm,
They're just not letting you in because they can use other races to fit that affirmative action
mm,
quota.
mm.
And it's just crazy. And we need our people in the healthcare field. I mean, there's so many times I've had to step in and speak up for black people because they just don't know. They're not interpreting the data. You know, their healthcare issues. They're not interpreting them for them to make an informed decision. And it's just scary.
Yeah, I mean,
It's really,
it's a trip to me because fundamentally, I'm not saying that, Yvette, I want you to talk about this for a second because you have a great like analysis on the difference between white supremacy and the tools that white supremacy uses. And I think one of the things that's always said is that we need to focus on white supremacy. But what we don't look at is this is fundamentally a perfect example. And I'm talking about tons of people that I've met have come here as a direct result of the nursing shortages. But when you study the history of how we got to that point, particularly in the Black American community, how do you replace us without fixing us? Yvette, you want to say something?
mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, what we have to ask what they're masking, and what they're masking is our failure. So they can say we're not gonna fix. Like, if you weren't here, if immigrants weren't here, you could say everybody would be like, well, what's up with the black unemployment rate, or why don't I see any black nurses, or why don't I see any blacks at these colleges, or why don't I see any African Americans at these Ivy League schools? They will be asking why we were not upwardly mobile, because all of these things are a barometer to determine how upwardly mobile African American descendants of slaves are. But since when you just replace us with people who look like us, then you don't see our failure. And people always one of the catch lines that people always try to use is, well, Yvette, you need to go after the white supremacists because they set this whole thing up. It's not my fault that I'm here. It's not my fault that they're using us. And what I'll say is, no, 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 no. You are willfully complicit in this game, in this white supremacist game. You may not be responsible for it, but you are complicit in it. And in that way, you still bear responsibility. You don't get to just say, I didn't do it and opt out and walk away with all the jobs and all the opportunity, all the affirmative action that's left. You don't get to do that.
Yes, yeah. Caller, thank you so much for calling in. The phone lines are lit. I want to give everybody a chance to get in here. Let's take the next caller. Caller, what is your name? Where are you calling from?
Tone, Yvette, this is Reggie from Boston. What's happening?
Beantown in here again. I always love when you call in, Reg. So what's your take on
Oh
this?
man, my take on this, I feel like Yvette feels, concerning uh, Issa Rae. I mean, I really, you spoke on how uh, African American nurses were erased, but I don't think we understand the the intra-diasporal erasure that's happening when we let people who are not African American insert themselves into our gender politics. You know, because if you look at who's out there, you know, we already discussed that, you know, Issa Rae, she's half Senegalese. You know, we've talked about Luvi, who's a Nigerian. Ashley with the Grapevine TV, she's from Nigeria. You go even further, at least one of the three sisters who started Black Lives Matter is the child of Nigerian immigrants.
And let me jump in there. Let me jump in here and say one other thing. What you notice, to me at least, you know, everybody has the right to opinion. It becomes a buffoonish view of Black culture as they make things like the Grapevine and as they laugh at the shortcomings of African American culture. And it doesn't feel like a laughing with us. It feels like a laughing at us. If you look at the movie Talk to Me, it wasn't Talk to Me with John Cheadle where Petey walked off the set because he's not gonna be laughed at. This is not laughing with me, and you know, it's funny. Exactly. It's funny because I think in so many instances we're not being honest about what is us and what you got to be part of us, and this is what the discussion is. You want to continue on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go even further down the list. But you know, when you talk about laughing at us and not with us, look at VH1. Mona Scott Young was born here, but she is the child of the Haitian immigrants. And look at what they're saying about, you know, the cattiness between the Black women, what they're saying about Black men. We have this long list of women that are taking on Blackness like a costume, speaking for and to African American women's issues when that's not even where they're from. Like even if we take it to Kamala Harris, you know, you look at her history, she's putting it on, that costume on and off.
Yeah, Kamala Harris is pretty much Indian, and I'm not talking about Native American.
Yeah.
You know, she was raised
that's
Indian.
Exactly correct. She was raised there. She was running around India. She was running around Canada, everywhere but here. But when she gets here, we're saying Kamala 2020, Black girl magic, and I don't even know what that means given her history.
Yeah, she's half Jamaican, to be fair, though.
Being erased from the conversation.
To be fair, she's half Jamaican. It's just a question of how much she was indoctrinated. Caller, thank you so much for calling in. With phone lines are lit, I'm going to take the next caller. Yvette, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still.
Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Nonetheless, Yvette, so is Halfrikan a real cultural concept or just a way to say not African American? If you're half deal,
I mean, it's just another escape hatch. Like I would listen. I would never, even if like let's say one of my parents is Ghanaian, one of my parents African American, we moved to Ghana. I just don't see myself running around Ghana talking about African Americanness all the time. This is where the place that I am. That's what I'm anchored in, right? It's just like you don't even hear like people who have Irish heritage or an Irish talk about it or fixate on it. The way you see you Halfrikans like fixate on that half African. They don't walk around talking about, you know, my daddy's Irish and I just, you know, and wearing little Irish stuff all the time. And you hear about it St. Patty's Day, and if you talk to them and your friends, they'll tell you their history or whatever. But for us, it's like an escape hatch. Like I don't want to be African American. I don't want to be identified with people who I see as African American. So I'm going to create this other space for me to be somewhere else that doesn't allow me to have that chattel slavery history rub off on me, even though that got you everything you got. Who were chattel got you everything.
You know, somebody just pointed out in the YouTube that the person that started World Star was a Haitian, and so like, you know, this is about really. I think people are really
let me just say one thing, Antonio. When you think about the fact that the person who started World Star was a Haitian, I want you to think about how detrimental. You know, part of the thing that we've always wondered, people have wondered about World Star, how could an African American, when you didn't know who started it, share all these awful videos of people, African Americans beating each other up and stuff like that? Well, it's easy to do if you don't necessarily identify as being one of us. If you see yourself as outside of us, that's easy to do because you don't see this as like your people. You're a super capitalist, right? You're not. Everything that we've done as African Americans is based on community, and we do it together in solidarity with each other. If you don't see yourself as part of that tribe, it becomes very easy to do stuff that's detrimental to the community as a whole.
Yvette, we got another caller, and I'm gonna bring them in and ask them a question. Caller, what is your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello. Hi. My name is Kimberly, and I'm calling from Chicago.
All right, Kimberly, I'm gonna pose this question to you, and then I'm gonna let you give your opinion or whatever voice you want to say. But I'm gonna ask, like, okay, so you're half descendant of slavery, and then you're half Eritrean or Nigerian or Senegalese. You're in a room. You're in a room. Let's say Nigerian for this sake, and they have this word for us called Akata. Now, what's funny is, or what's a trip is that there's this whole idea like black people make fun of Africans too. We don't have a cultural norm. We don't, this whole idea of black booty scratcher, whatever people use, that's like playground stuff from the 80s. We don't have a cultural word to denigrate like Africans, like the word Akata, which means wild animal. So essentially, you're in a room and your father or your uncle or your cousin starts to say that black people are shiftless, lazy, Akata. What is your response supposed to be? Is it to go quiet, or are you supposed to shut it all down? So I'm giving that to you.
No, my response is to shut it all down. My response to say they're in this room in the United States because of me and my people, because of that, because of the parent that is African American, paved the way for them to come. And if it weren't for that, they wouldn't be in the room, and they wouldn't be able to say that.
So what's your take on this whole topic?
Well, my take is I'm a parent of two kids I'm African American, and my kids are half African. And so my kids are half African.
What country?
And they from the Gambia.
Okay.
And they've been in Africa several times. They're very familiar with the continent of Africa, and they're very familiar with African people. And what I would say is, because of that experience and their experience here, they know they are 100% African American. There's no half African. They're 100% African American.
Can I ask you a question, caller? One question, because you might have some familiarity to help the audience. We keep calling Africa one place. It's 52 countries. Do you have anything that you can give us that differentiates? Because Gambia isn't a normal mix here. Especially in LA, we see a lot of Nigerians, we see a lot of Eritreans. What is the difference between these countries? Do you have any kind of knowledge where you can share with the audience?
Well, Africa is a continent. It's the most diverse continent in the world, from top to bottom. You have every shade of people on that continent. You have every hair type on that continent. So there's no one people in Africa. And countries are extremely diverse. You have some countries that have like 150 languages. So it's a continent, not a country.
Yeah, and it's bigger than the globe. They can't even fit it on the globe, so they shrink it. That's what a lot of people don't understand. I had a chance to go to South Africa. Now, what's interesting, coming back to the concept here, caller, my phone lines are just lit. So I appreciate you calling in and supporting. We're gonna take the next caller, but before I make that point, what I wanted to say is, what's a trip is when we deal with this concept, Yvette, you have people here raised entirely in South Central that have never been to Nigeria or Eritrea, calling themselves Eritrean. I was thinking about what could I compare it to, and this doesn't even do a service. My aunt is from the South. I mean, the deep South, Brooksville, Mississippi, deep South. I'm not from there. So essentially, I'm from the South, the deep South. I mean, I'm not from the deep South, but essentially what I was gonna say is that I was raised on the West Coast, and if my aunt starts talking about being from the South, I don't just say I'm Southern. I'm from LA. I was born and raised here. I feel like what's a trip is we haven't called people to the mat in terms of, if you're going to be here, if you're going to use the resources here, then you need to be part of the fight here. And I'm not talking about giving $100 to Eric Garner or something like that. I'm talking about really understanding that you are African American first. Not second, not last, first. What do you think, Yvette?
No, I think that's true. I think that's true, and I think they need to understand that, like, we don't. One of the things that we don't require as African Americans, and that's why I think that's why on the show, like I snap sometimes, is because we don't require that people be deferential. Like if you're not going to be deferential, then I should just treat you like you owe you owe the people here a debt, right? Like we don't do that. We let you come in and we say, well, where are you from? Oh, well, and people can talk about us or whatever, and we say, well, they may have a point. Like the woman whose video I played, if you didn't watch Breaking Brown the last episode, like we have this thing where we don't make people understand, and that's why I keep saying the foundational knowledge is important when you walk out here, because what happens is we have not forced people to understand what it means to be African Americans and what they owe to African Americans, and why you should want to be anchored in that. You should not want to be something other than that in this country, given the contribution of African Americans, not just to ourselves and not just to other black people, but to the country as a whole.
Yeah, and I hate to be redundant, but you come back to the other side of that is we haven't dealt with the fact that they are competition. I mean, fundamentally, what you see is there was a nursing shortage. So instead of dealing with the fact that you had shut down a generation of black women from becoming nurses and increasing the amount of training exponentially, you just said, I'm just going to get some people that already are trained that look like these people from somewhere else. I mean, think about that for a second. That's your grandma, your auntie. Think about it for a second. You can sit on it, you can believe something else, but that's just what happened here.
And that person will tell you that their people just worked harder.
Let me share something with you.
My mama could have been that too, but she wasn't allowed to be that.
Let me share something with you. We're gonna get to Issa Rae's show, but the co-star, I watched the video today that plays Molly, described in the video that her mother came from because of nursing shortages. That allowed her family to come to America to fill the void of nursing shortage. So a chain immigration. Now, I'm gonna read this to you. The first black woman to work as a professionally trained nurse in the U.S. was Mary Elizabeth Mahoney, who graduated from the nursing program of the New England Hospital for Women and Children in 1905. Because the hospital's policy at the time was that only one black and one Jewish nurse could enroll per class, Mahoney was not able to receive her diploma until after she had worked as a private duty nurse in the hospital for 20 years. Come on. What I want to do right now is I want to take a caller, then I'm going to go to break. Let's take this last caller before we go to break. Caller, what is your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Tom. My name is Marian Odesanya. I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you so much for calling in.
I listen to your show, Religiously You and Yvette. I totally understand what you guys are saying. I'm a first generation American. I constantly fight with my family about the word Akata, because I'm married to an American.
Back up a little bit. Because I love that you called in. I appreciate you calling in. I know Yvette does as well, because these are allies. When you can get an honest discussion going on. When you say you fight with your family, is this a word that was used growing up, just to be honest, so we can get a clear discussion going, to describe how were black people described to you?
Well, black people, my mom, for example, my mom growing up told me, don't bring home no shenanigans, meaning no ghetto fingers, no long hair, ghetto fingers, no people that don't speak white people English. You know what I'm saying? Just ratchet people. That was my understanding of it. But it's frustrating, because just for the simple fact that a lot of Africans, they are okay with being that chosen Negro. Like, it's okay for me to be that special token Negro. They're okay with that, and it's not fair.
And you know what's a trip, caller? I'm gonna chime in here, because I think Yvette can chime in as well. What's interesting is in my household, my mother never once. I'm going through my whole life. My father's actually married to a Belizean, but my mother not once ever said anything derogatory about an African. I actually had two full African friends that weren't even mixed, and there was it's that's what's so interesting about this whole like idea that black people here have some kind of climate that is derogatory towards Africans because it doesn't exist culturally. But like when you think about, because like I put this in the frame of even the visas. You know, the way the visas work here.
Yeah.
We get 1 year in Nigeria, but you guys get 2 years here. That doesn't make any sense other than the fact that they don't want us in Nigeria. And so like,
but it's also, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's also, you also have to look at how Americans are portrayed even in their movies and their cultures. It's yo, 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 hey baby, what's up, hat backwards, you know what I'm saying? Smoking a cigarette, just buffoonery. And we're all not like that.
well, I'm looking at the YouTube, and one guy just asked. He wants to hear a little bit more about your experience growing up, as much as you feel comfortable. Like,
Sure.
Did you hear things about black people being shiftless and lazy or anything of the sort?
My dad, like I know my dad, he worked for the CDC. Well, my mom, she capitalized on that nursing. My mom, I have 5 aunts. They're all nurses, all of them.
So nursing was the way that was the doorway in a way.
Oh yeah, that was Tone. Let me tell you, Nigerians. That's how they're getting into this country. Nigerian men, they come here. They don't work. They bring their wives here. They put their wives through nursing school. They don't work. They put the nurse. They make their wives go to nursing school, and they're the breadwinners. And that's how it is. And those fools be working like 7 days a week.
Man.
And that's how they maintain their lifestyle.
Caller, what I want to do now is just go to a break on that and let everybody sit, and we'll come back to a discussion. Thank you so much for calling in. Yvette, we're going to keep you on the line and keep this discussion rolling. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
What up, y'all? This is Antonio Moore from Tone Talks here on Dash Radio. You can press the Dash Talk button, or you can come on my YouTube. Yvette Carnell is my guest today. She had a great couple set of shows dealing with the.
Can I?
Go ahead, Yvette.
Can I address something? Can I address something, Antonio? I just want to address something.
Sometimes you gotta let Yvette go because she get fired up.
I was looking in the chat and somebody said, well, you know, one of the things Yvette and Tone don't do is address our behavior. Let me just tell you something. First of all, what is our behavior? Tell me what data that you show that shows that black people on average have worse behavior. Because if you look at the data, I see black people and white people do drugs around the same amount and get arrested at very different levels. So first of all, I want to know what data you're looking at to say. And you can say, well, black boys have their pants hung down around their waist. Well, so do a lot of white boys, and a lot of white boys and girls dressing all black and black nails and purple hair. So who's to say? So, like, one of the things that just really bothers me is the way black people sit around and blame other black people and give other people excuse to hate us in our own home. When you say that kind of stuff, understand that if you are an African American, you hate yourself. And you might want to get some therapy. Antonio, what did you say about we might need lineage therapy? We might need some lineage therapy, but until we can get that, you need to get your own therapy, because what you're saying is not in any way. You don't. But see, the reason you say that is because you listen to people that come here and just tell a lie. So somebody can come here and say, yes, you don't understand. In my country, we have kings and queens, and we don't act like y'all act. You can be like, oh my God, I've never been there. They do things differently. Well, go there and see what it's like, and then come back and talk to me.
Don't get Yvette started. She'll show up at your doorstep just like that. We're going to take a caller, and then I'm going to set up the second part of the show. Caller, what is your name? Where are you calling from? Well, I'm going to go ahead and set up the second part of the show, and that is, does Issa Rae, this is the star of the HBO show, and she did this whole Insecure thing, and her show Insecure showed the life of a Halfrican or a Black American. Now, I've seen her YouTube show, and I've seen a number of the episodes of Insecure, and I still haven't seen a Senegalese father. You know, and it you know, that kind of bothers me. So people say, well, she doesn't need to show that. Well, to me, if that's what you're like authentically like grounded in, like that would be naturally part of the show. And so like my question is, if she's not showing the life of somebody that has a father that comes from Senegal and is proud of that, like, is there a problem with this show? And I'm gonna go into a Cosmo article that she said, you know, there's a Cosmo article where she was speaking about race, and I'm going to read a section and then I'll let Yvette chime in. And the title of it was, "Can we not talk about my race for a minute?" And she says, this is written by Issa Rae and Cosmo. "I love being Black. That's not a problem. The problem is that I don't want to always talk about it, because honestly, talking about being Black is extremely tiring. I don't know how Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson do it. People who talk, think, and breathe race every single day. How? Aren't they exhausted? No, we don't breathe it, we live it." Yvette, what's your opinion?
Well, that's just you just read one part, and like that's the thing. Like, nobody's talking about oppression in terms of what happened to you necessarily on the way to work and on the way home. It's not something that you pick up and put down. Like, this is life, and that's part of your struggle to struggle against oppression. And if you're tired, you might want to get out the way and let somebody who is not afraid of that fight get in there for you. But the second part of that is, you have to understand, first of all, she goes into this whole thing about trying to prove her Blackness, and even trying to prove her Blackness by going into this thing with this white boy, and he knows more hip-hop people than her. So then she says, I was trying to prove my Blackness, so I turned in a paper written in Ebonics to prove who I was. And then she says, people said I talk white. And let me just let you out. Let me just say one thing. When Issa Rae says I talk white, she's not talked white. She's not saying really I use, I articulated my words. What she's basically saying, if you listen to her, she shows up to something and says, yeah, of course I did. And Black people look at her like, where'd you come from? What box is this? What Pandora's box is this? Because culturally, that's not the way we normally talk. It doesn't have anything to do with you talking better and because you talk proper. No, you talk like a valley girl, and you were weird, and you still are weird.
It's a performance.
Like you're weird.
It's a performance.
Yeah, it's a performance. But that was her. Understand one thing, and this is what I'm getting at. When she said I wrote a paper in Ebonics, what she was doing was performing African Americanness. She was being an African and African American. No, explain,
Yvette. You gotta explain when she was in 7th grade, she wrote a whole paper on purpose in Ebonics and turned it in. I've never done that. So what I think.
I never had a need to. I've never been that insecure.
I've never been that insecure. So what we're dealing with is this confusion about speaking proper versus being Black. What we're dealing with is a recreation of America. I want to bring a caller in, but my problem with Issa Rae's show has always been, LA is the middle Black family in this city is worth $200. Ain't no other LA. Now, you can sit up here and think that 10,000 or 15,000 Black families in a niche part of the city define the city, or you can deal with the data that comes out of people like Sandy Darity, out of Dark Hamilton, out of the Federal Reserve, which says that this city is starving. And you look at Skid Row, which I took Yvette down to, 60% of that is Black men, and we're 2% of the city. You're not showing a part of Black LA. You're showing your house. It was, slavery, we minimalize it. I don't do nothing but data. Look here, I'm gonna tell you this. The slaves were the backbone of the American economy. The backbone. And essentially, the slaves by themselves were worth more than all the land, worth more than all the steel, all the railroads combined. You don't understand what your family was worth to this country because you're just looking at the labor, let alone what your family created here. So what happens is we create this narrative and I'm not saying that maybe there were a few people here, but the bulk of us came on boats. And today what we talking about is if you came on a boat and then your family was forced to be subjugated as chattel slaves and locked out of wealth for hundreds of years, what are you owed as far as basic respects while you're here? Yvette, you want to give your opinion?
I didn't even hear the rest of it. When she said she was calling from U.S. municipality, I knew we was about to go make a left turn. So I mean, but that's just another form of escapism, right? So I'm in the street. I'm black. I'm African American, and I'm from. But no. I'm an Aborigine. Well, you from Australia? No. I'm a different kind of Aborigine. You don't know about us Moors or us sovereign people. We got all this weird stuff going. And I wonder, have you traced your lineage back to the people who, I'm not saying that there were none here. I'm just saying that conversation has been conflated as another escape hatch. So you got mixed people escaping. You got people who got African escaping. You got people saying I'm Moors, I'm escaping. You got people, so many people. I'm waiting for people to say they're aliens.
So this brings me to the second part of Issa Rae's comment. There's this presumption of knowledge. You played a video during your discussion where there was these Africans with this black lady and nobody knew what they was talking about. They said immigration is by continent, it's not by country, which made no sense to me. They said a lot of stuff about African American and the continent and everything else when that's not why the term was created. They said a lot of stuff that was wrong, and what Issa Rae presumes is we don't need to talk about it because everybody kind of knows already. She said this in the Cosmo piece: the pressure to contribute to these conversations now that we have a black president, because this was written while Obama was president, is even more infuriating. What do you think about what's going on in the world and how our black president is handling it? Ask a race baiter. It's all good, I guess. I want to answer with a Kanye shrug. I'm over it. But am I? Could I be? Even if I wanted to? Even now, I feel obligated to write about race. It is as though it's expected of me to acknowledge what we already know. Now, look, she has a show called Insecure. It's about the story of an awkward black girl. You put that in the title of your show. You wanted to do a show that was not about race? Why don't you sell it on that? But on top of that, there's this presumption that we already know. Now, the problem that we have here is if we go back, what you don't understand is that your position inside of a network is to speak for the black person that is not inside of a network. It's not about you just being there to eat some good crackers. What you think, Yvette?
Well, the thing is, like, that's always been no. That's part of your responsibility, and that's what I said. Like, you have to understand. That's why you have to understand the limitations for your community of having Issa Rae in a room, because she told you she's tired of talking about race. But what we need is somebody in that room who can really talk about race, and we don't know who in that room. In a room full of, when I say a room, I mean a room full of powerful people. A room full of movers and shakers who don't understand race because they ain't never had to. And I'm not even talking about just black people. I'm talking about white people, producers, people with resources and all that stuff. When you have those people in that room, you want somebody who wants to talk about race and wants to advocate for you, not somebody who just got a show and all of a sudden they just got a show. And that was like 2015, and she was already tired of talking about it. What kind of advocate do you think she is now?
You know, and this brings me to that last question I have for tonight, which is, what is the consequence? What's the consequence for allowing people to call themselves Halfrikan, which is essentially playing the fence? And you know, the consequence of that in a Trump America, we've shown you, me and Yvette, over the course of shows, the UN sent a poverty brigade to review poverty in America and compare it to poverty in the third world and in first world countries. In Alabama today, they said that the level of poverty is the worst they've seen in the first world. That's your cousins. Do you understand the consequence of somebody saying what Issa Rae said, that I don't want to talk about race? Do you understand that there's lead in the water in Flint? Do you understand that Skid Row is full of African Americans that aren't just lazy, that aren't just somehow not trying, but that were systemically shut out? What's the consequence you
But
think of that?
understand one other thing. You have to also understand is that that's why Issa Rae's in the room. That was her.
Explain
That was her signal to white America.
Well, you know, everybody's gonna say,
I'm the
no,
Negro.
everybody's gonna say, well, she did say, you know, she wants all the black people to win the awards, as if that balances it out, right? As if that
really matters.
As if that matters. Let's take another caller. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Let's take another one. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, what's up, man? This is Omar from New York.
What up, man? You want to give your opinion on this?
Yeah, man. I kind of want to interject. You know, you guys have been talking about Africans. I was born here in the United States. My parents are from Guatemala. And I think a lot of why the Africans act the way they do is there's also a class issue because Black Latin Americans tend to be the poorest Black immigrants out of all the Black immigrants. And then you also have to look at the performance of Africans in the UK. They underperform in the UK because it's easier for Africans to enter the United Kingdom, and so you end up with a more blue-collar, working-class African immigrant in the United Kingdom, whereas here in the United States, you have more of a professional-class African immigrant.
Particularly because the U.S. set it up that way. They didn't accept nothing but nurses, right?
Right.
So let me ask you a question, because this you got me back to one that I kind of missed. Do Caribbeans who had a variation of slavery suffer from a similar identity split as the Halfrikan when mixed with American slavery through one parent? Do you think they go through something similar where I don't really want to be? Because my brother is Belizean, half Belizean. I don't see this in him. I kind of Belizeans live in the jungles in L.A.
The reason I emphasize Latin America is because we're the only ones, along with African Americans in the diaspora, that are minorities within our respective countries. And so in Guatemala, we're 0.1% of the entire nation. And so we're dealing with a systemic racism there. And so when we get to the United States, we don't look down on the narrative and the history of African Americans because we're dealing with something very similar. But Caribbean folks and Belizeans are the same because they run their nations, essentially. They come to the United States with a different line of thinking of why haven't you guys picked up your bootstraps and done what you had to do already, which is very misguided.
Now, understand this. And Yvette, are you still there?
I'm here.
How do you tell people they should put their bootstraps up when you stole their bootstraps? I mean, let's be real, because like what I just showed you, again, I'm coming back to the nursing, and y'all don't understand. You need to look at this thing. If almost like, it sounds like almost like the bulk of them came through nursing, and then they locked Black people out from nursing. So essentially, you know, where's my bootstrap? Oh, you wearing it? So like,
oh yeah.
So how you
I
know?
went to law school. I'm a JD holder. I just graduated.
Congratulations.
And most of my classmates were Black immigrants. And then you had, if you were African American, you were upper middle class, high middle class. You very rarely saw, and I had a problem with it. I'm from the South Bronx. And so even though I am the child of Black immigrants, I'm going to let you know right now, my identity and who I am attached to emotionally are poor African Americans, because that's who I grew up with, and that is who,
you know,
that's where my narrative stems from.
Caller,
that's where my narrative.
Let me say this. I thank you for calling in so much. I'm gonna let you go right now, but you know what's interesting about his point is that that's what we saw with Stokely Carmichael and Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier. That's what we don't see with Idris Elba. That's not what we're seeing with this new form of immigration, and it's a problem for our politics, because if our politics in the room is essentially saying, can we not talk about race for a minute in the middle of a nation that has decided your families will live with hookworms. Your families will live with hookworms. It's a problem. Yvette, we're going to start ending the show out, but I want to give you a last chance to actually give your opinion on this on this whole topic of African Americans and Black Americans.
Well, one of the problems I think, and I just kind of went there in the chat, is that we like to be too nice. Like, as Black people, because we're so used to being collective, we don't understand that they come from a place where there are tiers and there are classes. And if you're on the top of that class, you're used to being mean and nasty to people on the bottom of that class, even if they're Black. And so, like, somebody in the chat was just basically like, well, what do you call the sons of slaves? It's not kings and queens. And I'm just like, we have to get honest. Kings and queens rule over peasants. Okay, and I went to Howard University. I know and was friends with too many Africans for you to come to me and lie to me, and with this lie that like you are somehow better than us. We had no choice but as African Americans but to stay here and fight, and we won a lot of stuff. We didn't win we weren't equal. We didn't get what we're owed, but we won a lot of stuff, and that's why you're here. Without us fighting, you couldn't be here. The fact that there's not a lynch mob outside your house is because African Americans fought, and I think. You got to hit them where you hit them, because they hit us. When they call you the sons and daughters of cotton pickers, they hitting you. You got to hit them.
Let me say this. This is Tone Talks. I always appreciate Yvette calling in. Make sure you catch her show Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 o'clock Eastern at Breaking Brown on her YouTube. It's fire. Now, what my opinion on it is similar to Yvette's. We got to understand the history of this place to make any kind of progress. Me and Yvette are part of something called the Angela Project. The Angela Project is trying to join a coalition of Baptists. I'm talking about like 2 million Baptists to push for reparations. But we got to understand it's not reparations based on color. It's based on lineage. And we also have to understand where the doorways at, where the doorways into our group are at, and what the cost is to come through that doorway. We've left that door open way too wide, way too long, and it's drafty in here. And what I'm saying to you today is not so much just attacking a concept, which I think is summarily flawed in Halfrikan. Because I believe that it, for me, if one parent is Eritrean and you are Nigerian, and you did 5 years there and you came back here and then you did 4 years there, now you're truly Halfrikan. But if you lived here in Detroit, if you lived here in the jungles of Los Angeles, nah, baby, you Black. You with us. And that means that you need to be with us on the front lines as well as in the classrooms. You can't just take the best parts and leave us with the sour taste. Now, I want to say, can you please go to tonetalks.org to subscribe and donate. This is the Dash Radio app. You can press Dash Talk. We're gonna end the show out. Thank you so much for calling in, and let's keep it going. See you next Friday. Thank you, Yvette, for calling.
Thank you.